Hey everyone, welcome back to another Ask GN. As always, leave your questions in the comment section below for next week's episode, which we're doing 2 right now. I've shot 3 episodes now. This is the 3rd. We did a public Ask GN, which should be up by now. We did the Patreon's Ask GN extended edition. You can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to get access to that. Now we're doing the 3rd one, because you all had a lot of questions and we wanted to make sure we got a lot of them this time. So, before we get into that, this is brought to you by the MSI GTX 1080 Gaming X and NVIDIA's GeForce Experience, which allows you to retroactively capture key gameplay moments with shadow play, convert captures into GIFs with new tools, and apply filters to games, #NoFilter. MSI's Gaming X PCBs are high quality with well-built power management and coolers that we've previously recommended. Learn more at the links in the description below. Question number 1 for this one, Lucian Popescu says, question for AskGN. Does AMD intend to do something similar to Ryzen refresh to Vega products? I mean, to go on lower lithography in order to get better performance and less power hungry. Is it possible for them to do that? It's certainly possible. Whether they intend to, I'm not sure. What I can tell you is that for a while now, there's been a smaller Vega product planned. I don't know what's happened to it. I don't know when or if it's supposed to come to market. I do know, and we've revealed this in a news video, that AMD is supposed to apparently be using 9 gigabit per second memory for some kind of video card product in the future, towards end of year. I don't know what that's going to be. All I know is that it's using that kind of memory, in theory. So, I don't know if that's going to be a Vega product, or a refresh of Polaris, or what. What I do know, again, is that there's a sort of shrunken down version of Vega that was supposed to come to be, hasn't happened yet, other than on things like this, Intel NUC, which is sort of Polaris anyway. So I do not know. I would suggest that towards the end of the year, there should be something from AMD in the graphics card department. I'm not positive what it's going to be. My guess is on eventually there'll be some kind of either lower tier Vega or a refresh, because they can still get some money out of this line. I mean, it's not been around that long. Let me turn on my GN award lamp. Not been around that long, and they were kind of stunted in sales by the memory prices getting jacked up like crazy. So I would expect there'd be some kind of refresh just to get some more ROI out of that architecture, but we'll see. Next one. This is kind of related. Thomson says, why are DRAM prices still so high and continuing to grow? I understand there is a higher demand now, but if you look at any retailer, there is plenty of stock available. GPU prices are crazy at the moment because stock is very low, i.e. you can't buy certain cards on most websites, but DRAM is available everywhere and still inflated. So I have some insight for this, actually. I spoke to a person recently about all this kind of stuff, and one of the things I learned that I did not know is that server memory can have margins as big as 60%. So this is what I learned recently. So when they sell to enterprise and server companies their memory, they are allocating an amount of the wafer. This is actually really interesting, to the company that bought it. So you've got a wafer. It's a big circle like that. And the wafer is sliced from a silicon crystal. And that wafer, which is just a circle kind of cross section of the crystal, that wafer is diced into dies. Sometimes people call them dice, plural. So the dies that come out, you get for one wafer out of a large memory supplier. There are 3 of them, Micron, Samsung, and Hynix. Out of one of them, you can typically get about 1,500 memory chips per wafer if we're talking GDDR5, for example, or similar sized chips, or DDR4 also. And so parts of that wafer are higher quality real estate than others. So for server and enterprise customers, a company like Hynix or Samsung or Micron will sell the center of the wafer to those enterprise customers at a higher price per die. And then the sort of outer edges of it, where you might have, from what I've been told, some artifacts of lithography, I guess. I don't know exactly how it works, but apparently there's some artifacting towards as you work your way to the outer edges of the wafer, where the silicon quality can go down to a point where it might fail validation for enterprise, but not for desktop consumer. they'll pull those and save them for a lower value product like desktop memory. So what I learned recently is that desktop enterprise memory got some 60% margins. Why would you sell to, I said desktop, enterprise server is what I meant. Why would you sell a desktop if your enterprise and server has 60% margins? That's kind of where it is. And so these people tell us we're making more money than ever. The memory manufacturers, like, well, I'm not going to name people, but the folks you would buy a memory stick from, meaning not the person who makes the memory module or the memory die, but the person who puts the die on a stick and sells it to us. Those people have told me that they're not making a ton of money because they're getting charged by the suppliers. And obviously, if they say, you know what, we don't like that price, we're taking our business elsewhere, they've got basically one other option, sometimes two. So what are you going to do? You don't have a lot of negotiating power if you're someone like one of the memory stick makers that we all buy from. And like I said, enterprise is where the margins are, so no one's really focusing on desktop. And then they've got phone companies like Apple and Samsung who buy up huge amounts of wafers for their upcoming phone launches, and they're willing to bid high on them because it's a high value product and they're going to sell millions and millions of them. So it's tough. It's tough to be an enthusiast right now when our dollar is valued less because they will get fewer of them for the same quantity of dies than they will if they sell them to someone else. And I can't blame the memory suppliers in that they're trying to make the most money for the product. Look at their stock charts. Memory prices are up. Somehow that correlates with their stock charts. Wonder how that happens. So there is, from what I understand, there's really no reason for these people to fight for you to have lower prices, because the longer this shortage goes on, whether it's partially artificial or not, the more money they make. They got more investment coming in because it looks like everything looks great for the supplier. They're the king of the market right now. So your question, why are they still so high even though there's inventory? It's because the retailers are paying a lot, the people who make the memory stick are paying a lot, and the person who's getting all that money, it's not really ultimately the retailer or the memory maker in terms of like the stick maker. It's the actual memory supplier who makes all that money, and there's not a lot we can do about it. China, I forget the name of it, but China's got a group that investigates price fixing and trade legal issues, and memory suppliers are being actively investigated for price fixing in China, at least. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. But I'll have more on this topic eventually. There's a lot that I picked up recently from the people I've been speaking with. We were exposed to a lot of people at memory suppliers. It's been a great educational experience, and I need to just kind of compile it all into one video and talk about it. Next one, Soupa, you previously mentioned that there's no tolerance for failing to spread thermal paste across the entire die of a GPU when attaching an aftermarket cooler. With this in mind, how often should thermal paste be replaced to ensure small spots such as edges and corners don't dry out and result in a dead GPU? I don't think you have to worry about that too much. I don't think you have to worry about a GPU dying because adequate thermal paste spread is getting dry. I would not stress about that. That said, it's going to depend on the paste. So stock paste is almost universally not that great. And if you feel like taking your card apart, it's really not bad to just replace it when you get it, because chances are stuff you can buy is going to be better. As far as letting it remain stock and replacing it eventually, there's not, I don't know, like just kind of keep an eye on temperatures. There's no hard rule. There's no rule that says paste dries up after a year, you should replace it then. It's going to depend on your use. It's going to depend on what the manufacturer used. And I would just say, if you really want to be diligent, more so than 90% of the market, if you want to be in that top percentile of people who really pays attention, kind of like someone who pays a lot of attention to their car and maintains their own car, same thing with computers, I would recommend running a very controlled thermal test when you first build the system. And when I say very controlled, I don't mean, it doesn't have to be the level of control we do. All you need to do is know what application you use to test it and use one piece of software to test it. Put the system under a known workload that you can replicate later and run that test maybe 3 times and average your data for those 3 test passes today. If you really want to be diligent about it, you can take a thermometer, ideally in the local room, otherwise the thermostat's an okay baseline, take a number down, average your data, and hopefully like each pass is pretty close to the next within a degree or so. If so, you have good data, set it aside, run that same test in a year, see how it compares in a year, and then from there you can make a judgment call. Most people don't do that, and I would say just keep an eye on your temperatures. If it starts looking higher, even if you don't have hard numbers to reference, then replace it. Asus, you mentioned like the Kraken G12 or something. Asus actually makes or buys really good paste for the stock paste on their closed loop liquid coolers. I wouldn't bother replacing that. We've messed around with it, and even cryo is not significantly better. Now, the thing is, difference ultimately with paste is not really about temperature and thermal performance, it's about aging and endurance. And it's hard to get data for that because it takes a long time to test it, obviously. So you're really just looking out for thermals over time, which you're just gonna have to check occasionally and see when it's decaying in performance. But cryo's got good endurance from what we've tested. They are obviously an advertiser of ours right now. However, there's a reason I allow them to be an advertiser. It's because they actually do have good endurance. And then the stock Asus paste we found to have good endurance as well. So if you have a CLC, you can just keep using that. You'll probably be fine. Next question. Ghostpilot says, there seems to be a gulf between impressive hardware specs on Gigabyte boards and their relatively mediocre software behind the times BIOS arrangements. Is this a criticism they are aware of, or are they taking steps to rectify? This is a great question, because this kind of gets into behind the scenes industry stuff. Gigabyte's very aware of it. Gigabyte has, so this whole industry comes down to a few things. It comes down to the people that you work with in the industry, being us for the most part. It comes down to your relationship with them, and then how much they care about their product, how much they kind of work with their team internally to improve that product. Gigabyte has some of the most proactive staff in terms of trying to collect our feedback. So we've got Computex coming up end of May, early June. That's in Taiwan every year. Gigabyte, I know, is planning to speak with us and probably some others on our thoughts on where their BIOS is weak and could use improvement. And so I would say, yes, they specifically are seeking to improve their BIOS. Their hardware's gotten really good on some of these boards, the gaming 7s especially. And their BIOS is good enough for most people, but it can be improved a lot. So we'll be talking with them. I'm sure they're talking to some extreme overclockers who are going to be more qualified than I am for statements on the high-end OC side. But from a usability standpoint, from missing features that I use that I'd like to see standpoint, I can provide some feedback there. Others probably provide feedback. So yeah, they're very aware of it, and they are taking steps to improve, which I love seeing. And that comes down to the individuals at the companies, because a lot of the time, some of the companies we work with, you can give them feedback and you just kind of feel like it's never going to go anywhere. So you like send an email and you're like, okay, whatever. I tried. I did my best. I guess we're just going to knock this point on their product until the end of time because they keep making them like this. Gigabyte's actually trying. It's just a matter of whether the people we interface with can convince HQ to make the changes necessary to satisfy us and other people. Next question, and by the way, I'll just say, that's exactly the kind of company we want to work with, because if I give them a mixed review where I say the hardware is fantastic, I really want to see better BIOS, and their response to me is, you know what, let's work together on this. That's perfect. You can't get better than that in terms of a response, because if they can respond and then start working slowly towards that goal, that makes everything in the industry better for the consumer. If it's like, if we say their hardware is great and their BIOS needs work, and then their response is to stop sampling us, that's a huge problem. And there are companies like that too, who just can't take an ounce of criticism. So I do very much appreciate Gigabyte's approach. Next question, Streetguru. Why does Ryzen hit a ceiling for its frequency, design, or silicon? I can only answer this so far. My qualifications are not that of a CPU designer. With that stated, I'm more on the practical testing side, so I can tell you what I've observed. And what I've observed is that I can't speak English right now. What I've observed is that for Ryzen 2, the 2000 series, we've noticed that typically we're hitting a thermal wall before anything else. So we published this that Ryzen voltage curve. It's really interesting data if you haven't seen it. And basically we plotted a curve of 100 megahertz increments in frequency versus the required voltage to stabilize that frequency without reference clock changes. And it becomes exponential. The curve starts going like that. It's almost like asymptoting, except in the wrong direction. So it's kind of an exponential curve. It would be even more of an exponential curve if we could safely keep pushing that, but we run out of thermal headroom. So thermal headroom is the first limiter for us. And then the next one is, well, I mean, really it's thermal headroom, and then I guess silicon quality at some point. Voltage you can kind of push, and it's not going to be deadly to the chip until you're like 1.6 volts or something. Obviously, you shouldn't run it that high daily, but you could push it that high. It's just a matter of, can you find a cooler that can support it? And once you get that high, you're talking exotic sub-ambient cooling, you can't just put bigger and bigger radiators on ambient and expect that to work. You need sub-ambient at that point. So to answer your question as best as I can, the ceiling that we run into immediately, like 4.2 gigahertz, starts to look like thermal. And even if the temperatures are still reasonable, you have to remember that Ryzen now is boosting similarly to GPUs with GPU boost, where it's taking a collection of sensors, there are dozens of them in the CPU. It says, what's my temperature in all these locations? What's my voltage? What's my leakage? Feed droop, all this. And then figures out how high it can boost. So just like with GPU Boost 3 on NVIDIA cards, the lower and lower the temperature on Ryzen, the more frequency you can sustain, and your leakage will go down too. So you can do this with less power output, so even less thermal concern, and also with theoretically slightly less voltage requirement. So at the end of the day, thermal always impacts this stuff pretty heavily, even if it's not the primary limiter in terms of frequency. I mean, obviously you have some kind of silicon or design differences too. I can't speak to those in great detail presently. I hope to be able to one day, but I need to talk to someone at AMD to educate me on that specifically. What I can say is, again, thermal's a big one and the most immediate that we should all be concerned about. Put a good cooler on it, that'll give you a bit more headroom. Because we even observed in that volt frequency content, we plotted the last few points with a bigger radiator, with a 360 instead of a 280. Did that because on the 280, we were getting instability at, say, 4.1, 4.2 gigahertz, whereas with the 360, we could sustain those numbers, which shows you there's a thermal impact. So thermal's a big one. Next one, chococake. It says, in the VRM temperature heatsink video, did either Gigabyte or Asus have a VRM temp sensor built in? I always wonder how accurate or useful those software readings are. I'm not sure if they did, honestly. I didn't check. Asus tends to definitely have them built in, but it's basically the same VRM on both those boards, except the Asus one uses 60 amp power stages instead of 40. But they're IR 3553s and 3555s between the two of them. So the sensors tend to be pretty accurate. With software, you're always going to have some level of inaccuracy, particularly with the CPU. The VRM, like the MOSFET sensors that you're talking about, we've tested those, did one on camera with how to kill your motherboard content. And our findings have generally been, 3 times we've tested this now, our findings have been with a known over temperature protection point, we are within 10 degrees Celsius with an external functionally case temperature with a K-type thermocouple. So if I stick a thermocouple to the top of the MOSFET and its over temperature protection is 150 C, and I force it to 150 degrees C, and it shuts down, my thermocouple reading will be about 10 degrees lower than that. There was one case where it was 15. But we're always 10 to 15 degrees within internal sensors. And you know the way you can check if they're accurate is basically over temperature protection if they have it. Because if you have hardware info telling you this thing's 149 degrees and then it goes up 1 degree and it shuts down, 150 is a pretty nice round number. That's probably over temperature protection. And the data sheet will confirm that for you. So if you can confirm OTP and then trip it, which I wouldn't recommend unless you really need to know it's accurate for some reason, then you know, one, you can calibrate it if it's off. Say you trip at 147.5, you can kind of calibrate for that. Of course, keep in mind there's some latency there too, but yeah, so they're pretty accurate generally speaking, and you can calibrate if not. A balanced diet. What do you do with old hardware you don't need anymore? Do you sell it, recycle it, give it away, etc.? Do you keep everything? So I've answered this several times over the past years. We try to keep as much as we can. GPUs, CPUs, memory, things that are small-ish, like a GPU is relatively small. Things that are small and important to the channel we keep, because we do a lot of regression testing, so revisiting an old piece of hardware is highly valuable content. If I sell everything, I can't do that. So we keep everything. I mean, like everything, until physically there's no more space to keep stuff, and then I have to start making decisions. Cases are the first to go. I can't reasonably keep every case. We would run out of space in a month. So cases tend to go. We keep cases that are kind of like milestone cases, really important ones for one reason or another, really bad or really good, and then a couple of highly common cases so that we can repopulate the charts when we redo all of our methodology with the best, the absolute best, the absolute worst, and then the popular. And everything else in between gets cold. Now, as far as where it goes, I don't sell them, generally speaking. Every now and then, I might sell a case for half MSRP, because I'm not trying to make money off of it. I'm trying to get the fuck out of my house. Might sell a case to a friend or something if they're building a PC. I've kind of saturated that pool of friends. They don't need more cases, just like I don't. So for the last 2 or 3 years now, we've been donating them to the local high school where there's a computer engineering program. I can't get a tax write-off on it because I didn't buy them. They're, manufacturers give them to us for review. So that's unfortunate, of course. But they're not in my house anymore, and I'm helping a really cool educational program. So it's a computer engineering program at the local high school where one of our contractors, Patrick Stone, who helps with CES every year, he teaches there. And so they just recently outfitted their entire classroom. All of his cases were from between 2004 and 2008 at the newest. And I gave him like 20 cases, and he got all the students to set up like the classroom computer lab computers on their desks and told them to unbuild it and transplant all the parts into the new ones that I gave them. So they have everything from like the Roswell Gungnir. Anyone remember that? You shouldn't. From everything from that garbage tier case to like a Be Quiet Dark Base 700, I think is the most recent I gave. It was like a $180 case. So they've got a bit of everything, which was really cool to see because I taught that class as a guest speaker recently, and it was fun interacting with it. And it's cool to see them get the experience of building with stuff that's like complete trash and then super high end that they can't afford because they're high school students. So you see like the appreciation of spending an extra couple dollars and like people understanding and learning, because they probably don't know a lot about money yet at this stage, understanding that like, okay, if I spend $40, I'm not going to get something good. If I spend an extra $20, it's a huge increase in value. If I spend another $100 on top of that, the increase in value starts sort of asymptoting or coming down on a bell curve or something. Well, not bell curve, you know what I mean though. Asymptoting, basically. So yeah, we give a lot of stuff to that school if it's too big for me. And I haven't really thrown anything away. Worst case, it gets like sold or given to a friend or something. But it's kind of a hassle. When I have sold stuff, and we don't really do this anymore because it's not worth the time, frankly. When I have, It's a case, and it's half MSRP to a friend to get it the hell out of my door. So we're not trying to profit off of selling the products is what I really want to emphasize here. We have shelves of video cards, CPUs, and RAM for a reason, because this business is built on testing those things. It's not built on selling them. So no, we don't sell them unless there's literally no space, and it's the big stuff that goes first. Next question about, oh, by the way, if anyone has like computer charities or something that could also use cases mostly, maybe coolers, I guess leave a comment below if you know of any, especially if they're on the East Coast, US. And if the school I give this stuff to runs out of space, then it'd be good to have somewhere else to give stuff to that could benefit from it. Because, I mean, I can't use it for much after we've tested it and we have no room, and I can't really get a tax write-off for it anyway, so I'd like someone who could use it to have it. It's all high quality generally anyway. I'll just note this too. In addition to that stuff where we give the school products, I worked with Asus not long ago. Asus at the time, representative we worked with contacted me and basically was like, Steve, do you need any liquid coolers? And I said, yeah, sure, we'll take like 5. Take 5 big ones. And he said, that doesn't help me at all. I was like, well, how many do you need to get rid of? He said 300 or something like that. And so the story was, all these companies, they eventually end up with overstock at some point. And if they don't sell it, they're spending money for that stuff to sit in a warehouse. In the case of Asus, I think they were coming out with a new generation. That stuff was perfectly good, but they basically had to throw it out because they were out of, they need to bring the new generation in. So I worked with him. I said, well, I don't want 300 coolers. Don't send me a fucking pallet of coolers. Here's what you can do. Send them to Patrick Stone at the school and let him teach the kids about liquid coolers. They can tear them down, they can install them in systems, whatever. And so he did that. We have some, I think Stone took a video of them opening it. They were all very excited. So it was pretty fun to facilitate that. That's the kind of thing I want to do more in the future as we grow and gain influence to do that type of thing. There's a lot of overstock, a lot of product gets thrown away, and it's just because it's more expensive for them to keep it. But if we can help facilitate stuff like that, it's good for everyone. Next question is from Jordan P, who says, you commented on the ray tracing video that NVIDIA's Tom Petersen had provided feedback on your Sea of Thieves console benchmarking. Is it common that industry contacts will give you feedback, will contact you on videos and that aren't directly tied to one of their products or reviewing a competitor? Yeah, I was checking the audio. I'm recording this alone tonight. So, yeah, it's pretty common. Tom Petersen is a very sharp guy. He basically invented FCAT. He more or less created the VR benchmarking tools that we've used in the past, and they're some of the best tools for VR benchmarking right now. So we respect his opinion a lot. The reason I commented on that is because for our console benchmarking, I know that Tom's very invested in frame time testing, and so is Scott Wasson, who's now at AMD and formerly Tech Report. And I've consulted with both of them about testing methodology for consoles and for PCs. Of what things do we need to look at? What terminology should we use? Can you correct any of these things I've done? Can you tell me, like, what would you improve here? What do you think we did really well? Did I get anything absolutely wrong? And I'll ask for that feedback. If I don't ask for it, sometimes I'll hear anyway and get some really good advice. So yeah, Tom mentioned when we were interviewing him for that RTX stuff, he mentioned that he had seen our Sea of Thieves content and he liked it. He had a couple of ideas, found it very interesting that Sea of Thieves tears, which I also found interesting. Neither of us expected that on a console. So that was very unique behavior, very strange for a game to tear on an Xbox One. But yeah, we actually hear somewhat frequently about content we make. Often I will hear what a representative thinks of something we made about one of their competitors more than about their own product. And when I say representative, you have to remember they don't always speak for their own company, right? The one they work for. They often just speak for themselves, just keeping in touch, saying like, hey, I saw your video. So recently, we had an advertising contact tell us that they saw the vacuum video and they were involved in coordinating that campaign, and basically said that they no hard feelings. They thought it was pretty funny. So everything gets around at some point. I gotta be careful now what I say. I'm Annie99. What temps should I look to keep my CPU and GPU under when overclocking and seeking quiet operation? I'm playing with the idea of deloading my 8700K. It's currently under H100 IV2. Temps below 55, but noisier than I want. So, man, if you're under 55, you have plenty of headroom. Intel CPUs are a bit different. Intel CPUs will run the same frequency whether if it's got a TJ Max of 100, it'll run the same frequency up to 99. It'll do so less efficiently. You'll have some power leakage. You'll have, obviously, higher temperatures in kind of a runaway fashion. As temperature increases, it increases up to a point. So you might end up in sort of a runaway scenario. But if you keep it under TJ Max, though, it'll run at the speeds you've asked it to. So you don't need to be sub 55. That's very aggressive cooling. If you're like, everyone's got a different number for what they're happy with temperature. And to some extent, it's all like voodoo, arcane magic that's based in nothing. But there is some science to it. For example, capacitors. Capacitors are rated at generally 85 or 105 C. And at those ratings, they'll have an hour rating, like 2.5 thousand hours, 5,000, 10,000, whatever. And then every 10 degrees Celsius you go over that, you have like an order of magnitude loss in lifespan. So there's some science to it, absolutely, but you don't need to be at 55. If you're at 55 and you're like, my fans are just a little bit annoying, I would say drop the speeds like 10%. See if you're happy with that noise level. If your temperature's still under 70, still under 80, you're fine. Going over 80, the only reason it really starts to kind of matter is because you get some heat buildup in that area of the board. If you forget to clean out your front intake on the case, you forget to clean out the radiator, you have a lot less headroom for that error. So the only really main advantage for an average user, I'm not talking big overclocks here, main advantage to keeping your temperatures lower is that you have more headroom if something goes wrong. If one of your two fans fails, if your front intake gets clogged with dust, you've got way more headroom to lose ground. But you've got a lot of room here. So, I mean, just drop the speeds. If you're under 80, that's pretty good temperature. If you're under 90, it's still fine. But yeah, everyone's got a different number they like for that. T Camps says, when developing the modmat, what was design iteration like while working with a manufacturer, a factory in this case? You mentioned iterating on materials and color consistency. Was that prototyped in-house with instructions sent to them? Was it discussed with them? They sent samples to you. How long were iteration times? We talk a bit about this in what we learned from manufacturing. Iteration times be pretty long. So to get a sample made, you're talking, it might take them a week to make it, and then they'll ship it. You might have customs to deal with that can delay things a lot, but it's a couple weeks. It's like a really good turnaround time is like 2 weeks. And so you really don't want to do too many samples if you can avoid it. But obviously the fewer samples you do, the more you're threading that line of like, well, what if something goes wrong? It's just like software, where if you fix a bug, you're worried that you've introduced a new one. So when we were doing initial iterations, and we send them like, this is all really great. Please don't change. Do not change anything. Change this one thing though. And they might send us a new sample and that one thing's fixed, but they also fixed something else that we didn't want them to fix. So eventually you get to a point where it's exactly what you want. But up until that point, you're basically like 90% of what you want. And every time that last 10% is something different. So it is really frustrating, but we got it worked out. It just took a lot of time, weeks and weeks. So I fully appreciate why product development life cycles are so long now. What else was asked here? Prototyped in-house? No, we kind of knew exactly what we wanted, and I had materials in mind. I have experience buying like $100 anti-static mats from industrial suppliers in the U.S., so I knew what I wanted in terms of quality. We just had to put together a high quality print with a high quality mat, and that was actually proved to be difficult. We finally found a factory though, and we're very happy with it. It's a completely custom product. It's not like if I want to make a keyboard, I could go to 1,000 keyboard factories and say I want that with that font and those color keycaps and that plastic, and it'd kind of be pick and choose, put it together. You can absolutely make really custom keyboards, put a ton of time into it, pour your life into it, make something really cool. But the point I'm getting at is this was not something that we could point at on a shelf and say, I want that, because what we got was, I want that material and I want you to print a really high quality print on it. And we need to figure out how to make this something I can afford. So yeah, in terms of like things we did in-house, the design was in-house completely. I concepted it, Andrew put it all in software, and instructions were sent to them. We had to, for example, we had to pick out, like, tell them exactly what colors we wanted. Even though we sent them a digital file, they wanted us to specifically name the colors with hex code or with Pantone or something like that, just to make sure they understood exactly what we wanted. So design iteration was not too hard, because we do that, we control that internally. The hard part, or the scary part, is if you iterate on or change a design, you're kind of scared that they're going to change more than you've asked them to. So once we got it to the state it's in right now, we were basically like, stop, don't touch it, leave it alone, just make more of them. And then when we get them, I personally inspect, obviously, all the ones I autograph, which is actually good because it makes me look at a lot of the mats for quality control. And we inspect like 40 to 60% of them. But we just got tooling made for it, so the hands-on requirement for that should decrease, because this is a lot of work. Last one, Nori. Oh yeah. How does it feel to have people willing to pay an extra $20 premium for your signature on your already awesome mod mat? It's interesting. I mean, like, I get it, because I've paid for albums that are signed by the bands. Like, I have autographed AFI albums and stuff like that, so I totally get it. I don't really, like, it's still kind of I guess just like surreal. Like, I don't know. I'm not fully caught up with it yet. I will say, from the standpoint of like providing it as a product, it's really cool, because I drive 30 minutes each way to the distributor. I have to unroll the mats, re-roll them, quality control check it, all that stuff. It is definitely extra work to sign them. But our investment, other than my time to drive out there and do that stuff, there's no more material investment other than the marker. So it's nice, because it's like, it's extra padding for someone who either really wants to support the site and what we do, or someone who just is, is a fan and wants that literal hands-on with the mat on it. And the extra money goes a long way. So I certainly appreciate it. And I appreciate why people want autographs, because I've wanted autographs from people I've bought stuff from in the past too. So I get it. But it's like, I mean, it's a YouTube channel, 240,000 whatever subscribers. So still getting used to it, basically. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. Anyway, thanks for the questions. Leave more in the comment section below, as always. Leave me some tech questions. If you see good ones, upvote the hell out of them. It's getting really hard for me to find them these days. So please upvote your peers if they ask a really good question you want to see an answer to. And subscribe for more. Go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to get the bonus episode from the last one. And as always, you go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of these mod mats. Actually, these things will be on there too. So this one and this one, these are really freaking cool. I'm going to talk about these more in the future. These are 3D laser engraved glass cubes we made with the logo. And the reason isn't just to make more merch. We're actually going to be using these for... Do I want to reveal it right now? Yeah, sure. We're going to be using these for awards, basically. So when a manufacturer makes like the coolest product at Computex or something like that, this is going to be our, here's your best of show award. Great job. You made the best motherboard that we saw this year, whatever. So it's an award, but we're also going to sell them on the store. So anyway, they'll be on the store at gamersnexus.net if you want to look at them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. Check, check.